So in this presentation, I'm going to present the third and final guide/tool that we're launching today in this webinar. And this is a ICAT guide for integrating subnational and non-state actors into M&E systems that are designed to monitor and evaluate national climate change adaptation policies. So in this presentation, I'm going to go through the following. I'm first going to briefly introduce this guide. I'm then going to explain why subnational and non-state actors, which in this presentation I've abbreviated to SANS actors, are important for the M&E of national adaptation policy. I'm then going to explain why integrating these actors into M&E systems can be challenging. And then I'm going to explain how the guide that we've developed can help readers integrate these actors into their M&E systems and quickly run through how to use this guide. So again, starting with the introduction. So in terms of what this guide is aimed at, the guide is aimed at national government actors who are responsible for the monitoring and evaluation of their national adaptation policies. So in other words, its target audience are individuals who will be developing and operationalizing M&E systems for national adaptation policies. Now, the guide is intended to support the broader policy of developing and operationalizing an M&E system by providing readers with guidance, actionable measures, considerations, and good practices that will help them strengthen the extent to which subnational and non-state actors are able to participate in the M&E systems that they're developing. And just an important note that this guide doesn't provide a step-by-step guidance for developing M&E systems. Such guidance is provided elsewhere, already exists, and you can actually find links to such guides within the introduction of this guide. So moving on to the second part of my presentation, where I'm going to run over why subnational and non-state actors are important in the monitoring and evaluation of national adaptation policies. And to do this, I think it's first and foremost important to clarify who subnational and non-state actors are. So in terms of, so the term subnational and non-state actors is, it's essentially a compound term that's used to describe a broad group of actors. And it's unsurprisingly constituted of subnational actors. So this is actors that operate at any level below the national level. So this could be state, city, district, local, any sort of jurisdiction below that of the national jurisdiction. And then it also includes non-state actors. And so these are actors that are not part of the government or state. So this could, for example, include individuals, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and any other type of organization that operates outside of the influence of or direct control of the national government, or the government, sorry. And so in other words, the term can be used to describe any actor that isn't part of the national government or state setup. So why are these important in tracking and evaluating national adaptation policies? So in other words, why are we interested in having them as part of the M&E process? So while arguably being the key player in driving adaptation within their countries, national governments rarely, if ever, possess the necessary mandates or capacities to achieve the goals of their national adaptation policies without the support from subnational and non-state actors. So as a result, it's generally accepted that achieving the objectives of national adaptation policies will require some form of multi-governance approach in which the responsibilities for planning, financing, and implementation of adaptation are to varying degrees shared amongst the national government, subnational actors, and non-state actors. So consequently, while the national adaptation policies are crafted by the national government and national government actors, actually achieving these policies often is at least partially reliant on action from a diverse coalition of subnational and non-state actors. So subnational and non-state actors can be involved in the implementation of national adaptation policies in a whole multitude of ways. So for example, while national adaptation policies establish the broad vision for adaptation within a target policy area, and then also put in place some, a framework of instruments that mandate and support its implementation. So they can put in place legislation, regulations, standards, incentives, penalties, funding, etc. It's actually subnational governments that are often responsible for translating these broad visions established by the national policy into tangible policies, plans, and actions that are appropriate to their jurisdictions. Similarly, the implementation of specific activities under national adaptation policies are often outsourced by national and subnational governments to non-state actors, either because the government actors do not themselves possess the capabilities to implement these activities, or it represents better value for money to outsource them to a certain type of non-state actor instead of building up the capacity to do it themselves. So, for example, businesses and universities are often contracted by national or subnational governments to deliver goods and services that support the implementation of a policy. Meanwhile, non-governmental organizations or civil society organizations are often involved in the implementing of policies through partnerships with national or subnational government agencies, or through receiving government funding to carry out specific programs or initiatives. And finally, subnational and non-state actors can also contribute to the realization of national adaptation policy objectives without actually formally being involved in the policy implementation. So, for example, non-governmental organizations and city authorities are often found to be implementing activities that contribute to policy objectives of the national government without being provided with direction, funding, or any kind of operational framework by national plans, programs, or strategies. But they still are nonetheless contributing to the achievement of the objectives of these plans, programs, and strategies. So, given that they are commonly responsible for the on-the-ground implementation of national adaptation policies, subnational and non-state actors often represent gatekeepers to information relating to how policies are being implemented and whether they're actually achieving their anticipated results. So, a long story short, when subnational and non-state actors play a key role in the implementation of national adaptation policies, the M&E systems being developed to assess these policies will need to integrate these actors into the system, providing them with a framework, infrastructure, and enabling environment so they can supply the M&E system with the required data, or with the data it requires. And so this figure basically just illustrates what I've been describing, and it shows the national government puts in place the policy, and then there's a vertical integration of the policy down towards actors at different levels within the state and non-state sector. And essentially, in order to track the progress being made in implementing these policies and or the results of these policies, information then has to flow from the implementing entities back up towards the national government so they can develop an overview of how these policies are going. So now we've covered why SANs, or subnational and non-state actors, are important in the M&E of national adaptation policies. We're going to look at why integrating these into M&E systems can be challenging. So starting from the bottom, what does integrating subnational and non-state actors into an M&E system actually involve? So integrating these actors into an M&E system refers to the actor providing actors with a formal role in the M&E process, namely data collection, and putting in place the necessary elements that enable them to carry out this role. So in of itself, it's a relatively straightforward process, and it should essentially involve first assigning them with responsibilities to perform specific tasks in the M&E system, and this would be done by providing or assigning them responsibilities within the M&E system's M&E plan. And then second, you would need to provide them with the following elements. So indicators to collect and indicator protocols that tell them how to collect these indicators, tools and methodologies for collecting these indicators, reporting protocols that specify how and when they should report data, institutional arrangements that enable the sharing of data. So this could be, for example, agreements or establishing multi-actor partnerships. And then finally, supporting arrangements such as the provision of capacity building to these actors to help them collect this data properly, and also finance to cover the costs of collecting data. So essentially, if it's this straightforward, then why is it challenging? Now, this can be challenging because while the presence of these elements described in the previous slide are a prerequisite to integrating subnational and non-state actors into an M&E system, their presence alone doesn't really guarantee that external or that these actors will actually partake in the M&E system, that they will actually collect the data required and submit it on time and do so to the quality required. So those developing M&E systems need to be aware that actors expected to participate in an M&E system, that they have their own agency, meaning they have the freedom to choose the activities that they engage in and the extent to which they engage in them. So this means that simply putting in place the elements that enable them to participate in the M&E system isn't always sufficient. And instead, those developing M&E systems need to put in place need to create the correct conditions in which subnational and non-state actors are willing to participate in the M&E system. So they're willing to use their own resources, their time to do this. And so what conditions need to be in place for subnational and non-state actors to participate in an M&E system? So subnational and non-state actors, or any actor really, will be willing to participate in an M&E system when they deem that the reasons for doing so, or their motivating reasons for doing so, outweigh the burden that participating in the M&E system poses. So a subnational and non-state actor would be willing to participate in a system, or whether or not they will be willing to participate in the system will be determined by the overall size of the burden posed by the M&E system. So in other words, do the actors in question have the necessary resources and capacities to collect the data they're being asked to collect? And also the net strength of the motivation for participating in the system. So do the actors in question view participating in the system as being worthwhile for them? So the elements that determine whether an actor will be willing to participate in an M&E system is visualized in this figure, with the question of whether they have sufficient capacity being determined by the two factors on the left side. So that's essentially, whether or not they have the right capacity is determined by the capacities possessed by the actors. So, essentially what technical expertise do they have? Do they have the required equipment? What budget do they have? What staff availability do they have? And it'll also be determined by the capacity demands posed by the system. So, what level of technical expertise is required to collect data? What equipment is required to collect data? How much budget, staff time is required to pay for the data collection?
Thomas, we just have 2 more minutes left for your presentation. Thanks.
Okay, then in which case I'll hurry up. And on the other side, we have pull and push factors. So this would be, what benefits do they get from participating in the system? And push factors is, are they mandated to participate in the system by, say, legislation or agreements or the expectations of their stakeholders? So essentially, it poses a challenge, and it's up to those who are developing M&E systems to ensure that the enabling conditions are in place for subnational and non-state actors to participate. Now, with subnational and non-state actors, this can be difficult as these actors are often less likely to possess the capacities required to collect appropriate data, and they also might view participating in monitoring and evaluation of a national policy as not their responsibility. So in that sense, are less likely to prioritize it. So moving on to the closing part of my presentation. So how can this guide help its readers integrate subnational and non-state actors into M&E systems? So the guide is essentially 2 parts. Part 1 provides an introduction, and it goes over a lot of the content I've just talked about here, with a bit more on the process of M&E system development. And the purpose of this part is to bring readers up to speed with what they need to know before embarking on this task. And then part 2, which is the main bulk of the guide, provides readers with guidance on how to successfully integrate subnational and non-state actors into their M&E systems. And now it does this by providing 2 things. First of all, it provides readers with guidance on how to identify shortfalls in capacity and motivation amongst the subnational and non-state actors that they want to participate in the M&E system and how they can do this during the broader process of developing the system. And secondly, it provides readers with an array of different measures and good practices that can be implemented to strengthen subnational and non-state actor participation in the M&E systems they're developing. And a table with all these measures is viewed on the right of this slide. And the different measures and good practice that this guide provides to readers includes those that reduce the technical, human, and financial capacity gaps that make participating in an M&E system burdensome for subnational and non-state actors. So this is very important in terms of making it manageable for these actors and making sure that they can actually provide you with the data. And it also provides a series of measures for strengthening the push and pull factors that ultimately will motivate subnational and non-state actors to participate in the system and convince them that this is beneficial for them, and therefore they should allocate their resources to participating in the system and collecting this data. And now my last slide, in terms of how to use this guide, as with the last one I presented, the first step is downloading and reading it. The guide has purposely been designed to be easy to read, so to be readable in 1 or 2 hours. And thus, readers should be able to go through this document quickly and obtain a good understanding of, firstly, the challenges they may face in integrating subnational and non-state actors into their M&E systems. And secondly, how to overcome these challenges while they're developing the M&E systems. And secondly, a note that this document is intended to be used as a source of inspiration. So there is no one way of successfully integrating subnational and non-state actors into an M&E system. So as such, this guide does not provide users with a step-by-step methodology for doing so, but instead it provides readers with a menu of potential measures that they can use to better ensure that actors are able and motivated to contribute to the M&E systems they're developing. And they should be able to go through this menu and essentially get ideas about what is applicable to their circumstances, given the resources they have to develop these systems. And as such, we hope that when readers are developing M&E systems, they will revisit this document and essentially use it as a reference document for different stages of the process in order just to get good ideas and good practices to make better systems that produce the data that they need to assess their adaptation policies.
Right.